Austin Tech Connect is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Founded in 1992, ATC exists to help unite the local technology ecosystem and to encourage the spread of community, collaboration, and conversations in Central Texas. This podcast is sponsored by SailPoint. They are a leading provider of identity security for the modern enterprise, empowering organizations worldwide to put identity security at the core of their business. With a foundation of artificial intelligence and machine learning, SailPoint Identity Security delivers the right access to the right identities and resources at the right time. Now, here is this week's episode.
Welcome to Austin Tech Connect, the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. This is the podcast that looks at the future of Austin's technology community. And every week, we bring to this show leaders so that we can hear their stories of success and to get their advice on how we can all thrive. My name is Tom Singer, and I have been with the Austin Technology Council for the last year and a half, and we are working hard to reach into the community and draw out those leaders who want to think about the future, want to support the cause of the community coming together, and have a civic-minded entrepreneurship bone in their body. That's who we're looking for, and that's what we do, and that's who we have today. In fact, today, our guest is Luke Fischer, the CEO and co-founder of SkyFi. Hey, Luke, welcome to Austin Tech Connect.
Thanks, Tom. Super excited to be here and talk about everything from SkyFi to Army stuff and everything in between and why Austin is such a great place to do it all.
Yeah, this is going to be a great interview. Luke is really, really interesting. This is the first time I've ever met him, but in prepping for the call, what I learned about him is he is a startup entrepreneur who loves building companies. He's an Army aviator. He was in the Army. He was a lieutenant colonel. But after getting out, he went to Stanford Business School. And that's where that entrepreneurship bug really got under him. He went on to work at Uber. Then he got into the VC world. And then he co-founded SkyFi. And he really likes working with the employees to grow a company and make a difference in the world. So, Luke, let's go in the way back machine. You're not from Austin. You've only lived here a couple of years. Where did you grow up? Where did Luke Fischer's adventures begin?
Yeah, as I tell some of my friends and my family, I grew up in Ashland, Wisconsin, which is about the opposite of Texas in terms of the weather, the activities, the size. So lived right on Lake Superior, Ashland, Wisconsin, small little farming community. That was it. So played football, kind of typical sports, but had about 5,000 people in my town. And most of those were cows as well.
5,000 people, 5,000 cows.
Yep.
What did your parents do?
Yeah, my mom worked at the high school. And then, she was really informative, for getting me into the military channels with an ROTC scholarship. And my dad started an insurance agency in our town. And that was it. So pretty small town, middle class, life.
So where did you do your undergrad?
I went to Xavier University, and that's where I did ROTC there as well. So I got a scholarship from the Army to go to school, which is great. I knew nothing about the military. My mom literally was like, fill this paperwork out. She filled about 90% of it out. Next thing I knew, I was at Xavier University about to join the Army, knowing nothing about any of that.
So after college, you go and do your service since they paid for college. So tell me about your Army service. How'd you get into aviation?
Yeah. When I joined ROTC, I didn't even know the Army had helicopters. But 9/11 happened my senior year. So that changed, the trajectory for myself, my classmates. So immediately after graduating, I went to flight school. I just, thought, helicopters would be cool, and they very, very much are. I went through flight school. We were pumping flight candidates through as fast as possible, graduated, went to upstate New York for my first duty station, and spent about 6 years there. And most of that time was on year-long deployments. I did a couple year-long deployments to Iraq and various other locations. And then went to the special operations side of the aviation world, which was much more dynamic, much more interesting to me, but also a ton more work and problem solving.
It's interesting because you talk about that 9/11 happened your senior years. So I'm a lot older than you. And I don't think my generation, I mean, I went to college under Reagan and Bush. It was kind of very peaceful time. And I don't think that the Gen Zers really understand, even with the turmoil we have in the world today. But when I talk to people who are in that 7 or 8 year age gap around you, that was a really pivotal event. It really is sort of that unifying event of your generation, and being in the ROTC and ready to go full time into the Army. What was that like? How did that impact sort of the soul of Luke?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, I couldn't even describe how it impacted me, just from an ability to handle stress, decision making, problem solving, building close connections with people. And then, as it relates to the entrepreneur world, is like understanding what it takes to have and build a high performing team that can, kind of solve any problem that comes to the doorstep. So it was really challenging, super stressful. I had no idea I was going to serve 16 years on active duty, then go to the reserves and finish out the 20 years of service when I got the ROTC scholarship. Like I said, before 9/11, people would kind of come in, you do your 4 years, you get out, you go do something else. There was always something going on, but not as big as what I experienced, being a, early 20-something adult, just forced into war, not forced into war, but just having this opportunity, I would say, to just learn, on the global political, scale of what we're doing.
I interview a lot of entrepreneurs on this podcast, and I had my own podcast for 8 years, and I interviewed about 800 other entrepreneurs on that show, and a couple of others. So I've talked to a lot of people who are kind of growing companies and doing what you do. And when I talk to someone who has a military background, I find sort of a thread of leadership that runs through people who come out of the military and go into entrepreneurship. It's a little different than just getting out of college and saying, I'm starting a company. What do you think the military brings to entrepreneurship that allows people to succeed and be ready for the ups and downs of startups and this crazy tech world that we're in?
Yeah, I really think it's decision making and speed of decision making. And, startups live and die by their decisions, and there can become this paralysis by analysis. If you're not sure how to solve a problem, because every startup is solving a problem. If you take forever and you don't know how to delegate decision making or responsibility or tasks to just expedite this learning process in a startup, startups can fail. And so that decision making and speed and going, hey, we're going to go with a 60 to 70% solution, and it's good enough. Because whatever plan we have, as soon as we put it to market or put it to customers, it's going to change anyway. So there is no such thing as 100%. And that same mindset came to the military. You could plan and plan and plan. And the famous saying is, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And it's very true. Like, no good product survives first contact with the customers. It just changes. So you just have to be comfortable with that. So decision making for sure. And then also leadership. Just pure like, hey, you are in charge, act like you're in charge. A lot of times without direction, people will scramble, some good intent, some, not informed intent, and, things can get off the rails. But if you just have this, very clear who's in charge, who makes decisions, who shouldn't make decisions, and then how do we, decide what leadership is to, influence others to get a result. I think that's very simple terms of what leadership is. And knowing that, like, on the startup world, you're trying to get results, whether it's a software product or a hardware product, so you're influencing this company, you're influencing customers and partners, how to do this. So decision-making and leadership, I think, puts veterans in a very unique position to be very successful entrepreneurs.
Well, I love the fact that you talk about, influence as an entrepreneur and as someone who's raising money and as someone who has customers and as someone who is leading a team. We think so much about influencers in today's world as these, young TikTokers or people on YouTube, and everybody wants to be an influencer and they want to broadcast to the many. But one of the things that you sort of touched on is that's not necessarily the way you influence in the world that you live in, or the military world that you used to live in. Influence is really sort of that one-to-one relationship and being able to help guide. Let's talk a little bit about being influential in a role like you're in now in entrepreneurship. Why is that so important?
Yeah, it's it kind of boils down to setting the example for others, being that good example and, influencing others, and why it's important, because it sets a tone for the company, and not just influencing to get a decision, but influencing how, they live their lives, what the values are that, you are talking about and you live from an example life. And so I think it gives confidence to people when you have a strong leader. And again, the strongest leaders I've seen admit when they're wrong, admit when they've, made bad decisions. And that's another side where, I think too many times, influencing others, you want to say like, hey, I am never wrong. I'm the boss, I'm in charge, and everyone knows that. That's just not a thing. It's not possible, no matter how smart you are.
That's so interesting. I was leading a conference. I was the MC for the CEO C-Suite Summit that the Austin Technology Council does. And interestingly, I mean, this is a little example, but I forgot to introduce one of our sponsors who was supposed to introduce the next panel. And, our sponsors fund us. We're a little nonprofit. We need to have the companies in town, sponsor us, be members in order for us to do what we do. So I try to take really good care of our members and our sponsors. And I just forgot. I got excited about the panel and I introduced it. And then I was in the back of the room going, oh my God. I mean, they paid money. Part of it was stage time. And so I went and told them, I'm going to bring you up afterwards. And they're like, don't worry about it. No. And I'm like, no. And I got up and I said, look, if I make a mistake, I just own it. Here's what happened. And then I brought the sponsor up. It actually worked out really well for the sponsor because it didn't look like they were angry. They were just like, hey, it's cool. We're not about the FaceTime. And they weren't. But at the same time, everybody paid probably twice as much attention to them. Right. But it was interesting because afterwards, I had about a dozen people comment on the fact that they had never seen somebody emceeing a conference tell the whole room, by the way, I screwed up. They'd seen people skirt around it. And I thought, but that's what you're supposed, if you screw up, just say I screwed up. I mean, this wasn't a life and death matter. It was just a thing. And it was shocking to me how many people were surprised that I fell on my sword for my own mistake. And I'm like, isn't that what we're supposed to do?
Yeah. You're supposed to, but surprisingly, it's absent in a lot, the industry.
So why Stanford when you went to business school?
Yeah, I was really fortunate. There was an individual who's become a good friend who had an affinity for special operations, soldiers, and wanted to give back. The individual never served. And, essentially he was a Stanford graduate and set up a fellowship, a private fellowship that said, hey, in this organization that you belong to in the special operations side, if you guys can get into Stanford, guys and gals, I'll fund it. So, I was one of the first recipients of this. I was writing my essays. I found out right before deployment, I had the opportunity to apply to Stanford. I was writing my essays in a tent in the middle of the Middle East. No exaggeration. I'd not taken a GRE. I was really scrambling. Set aside, I was flying combat missions almost every night. So super stressful, but again, it worked out. I think I made a compelling essay because I definitely weave that in there, despite my GRE scores that I managed to take. So it made up for that. But that was, phenomenal and very formidable, pivot point in my life, or just seeing kind of the other side of the table, seeing what entrepreneurs do and, learn a little bit about business, but more importantly, build a network that'll last a lifetime.
And that's so important. My background, we've never met, so you may not know, is I spent 14 years as a professional speaker, going into companies, teaching people about community collaboration, conversations, building your network and your brand, and why the people you meet along the way are really the secret weapon, sometimes 10, 15, 20 years later. And we live in this world where everybody just wants likes, links, shares, and follows, and they're not concerned with what is the real deeper human connection. So what is it that you have found and seen about the relationship side of business that's allowing you, to thrive and grow in the role you're in now?
Yeah, boy, I think that I reiterate that all the time to veterans and friends and colleagues it's about your wherever you are, the power of views, based on your network and who your, closest people you confide in and, who you can go to for help. especially in business school. I realized that. I wish I would have realized it sooner, but you just have to live through it to experience where, like, no matter who's listening to this, like, business school is amazing. It's great. Grades don't really matter. You're going to learn some stuff, but it's really about the network and the lessons on, leadership and decision-making and entrepreneurship that you can take. But, that was really important for me, just to realize that network will always be there. No one's ever asked, what I got on my, economics test on the second quarter. And at the same time, I interview a lot of people. I don't care like what their grade point average is. Can you come in and work and hustle? But that's allowed me to understand, the dynamics of network building and how to do it in a genuine way, both from meeting with companies, partners, customers, friends, and investors. Especially in the VC network, I got a little bit of experience there. It's a small world, and especially if you narrow down what I do at SkyFi in the space and geospatial industry, it's even smaller networks. So having a good relationship and networking for the sake of just being a good person is great. Not when you need it for a transactional purpose.
Well, that's what we're trying to re-spark in the Austin technology community with the Austin Technology Council. We're trying to go back to being that grassroots organization that really gets people to care about those real relationships that have that long-term piece. So we could talk about this for an hour, but I do want to get over and talk about SkyFi. So you co-founded SkyFi how long ago?
Just over 2 years ago. So January of 2022 is when we really officially kicked off the company.
And that's about the same time that you moved to Austin. Is that correct?
Yeah, I moved to Austin about 6 months prior. Wanted it for a lot of reasons. There's good veteran community, good, educational opportunities, the family, and we had some closer family in Oklahoma as well. So we moved there just a little bit earlier. But once we hit the ground, it was just amazing. It was eye-opening with the networks and the connections and just this startup mentality, which was really surprising because I didn't really realize how deep it was in the technology that is coming to Austin almost continuously. Has been amazing over the 2 years I've been here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about SkyFi. How did it get started? What do you do? And why is it so important to all of us what you're doing?
Yeah. So I was in the venture capital world at a firm called Shield Capital that was investing in space. I was there as an entrepreneur in residence with the intent to start a company. That's what I did. So I was thinking about using autonomous vehicle data because I came from the electric aviation world and autonomous vehicles. And I was going like, well, as a byproduct of how they operate in the environment, they collect a large amounts of data. So if you could package that up and essentially map the world, that would be a good product. Was talking to a buddy of mine, from Uber, who was coming to Austin to meet with a guy named Bill Perkins. I didn't know Bill. And, my buddy and I, Nikhil, we had lunch. He calls me 4 hours later after his meeting with Bill because I told him about my idea. He's like, you got to talk to Bill. He wants to do what you're doing, but for space. And he's already taken some really good steps in this. So it was the day after Thanksgiving, November 21. I was at Bill's house and, just hearing about his idea for SkyFi and, what I was thinking from a different level. And then you fast forward, we hit it off immediately. We started SkyFi with this intent that, there's this amazing technology flying overhead called satellites and drones and aerial imaging platforms and analytic companies that use this data, but most people can't access it. So let's make it easier. So SkyFi is an Earth observation marketplace company where we partner with satellite companies, aerial imaging companies, and analytic companies to offer up a very intuitive web and mobile application that caters to enterprise users, government users, and people of the world to access this technology. And so what does that mean? Well, it means if you want a satellite image of anywhere in the world, you can come to the SkyFi platform and get that imagery. There's paid imagery, you can get free imagery. And then what's really exciting is the analytics that are coming through our marketplace approach. So we don't build them ourselves. We don't build satellites or analytics. We partner with the best in the world. And so this technology is relatively new for the commercial world. The government, specifically the US government, has historically been the largest and currently the largest purchaser of geospatial technology. But we're at this inflection point where, thanks to companies like SpaceX and dozens of other companies that are building satellites and rockets, launch costs are decreasing. There's literally more innovation going up in space. And so we're the company that has positioned ourselves to be the name when you think of how do you access this? How do you access this? The imagery, the data, the analytics to power your business needs, and it's through us. And the best analogy I'll end with about SkyFi is, I think of us similar to Netflix, where the satellite companies and analytic companies are the movie studios of the world, and everyone wants their content on Netflix because it's easy to access. It's a one-stop shop. So yeah, that's us.
So you've grown pretty fast. I mean, just 2 years and a couple months since you sat down in Bill's living room and said, let's start SkyFi. What have been some of the interesting parts of that growth? I mean, we live in Austin. We have a lot of companies that are growth oriented, but we have so many startups that would like to grow that just sort of bounce along. What has led to the successful growth that you've had, and what have you learned along the way?
Yeah, it comes back to some of the points we were hitting on earlier. It's the networking and the team building. Through the network, we were able to, between Bill and I, raise, funds right away, really quick. That allowed us to make a bet on building the team very quickly. And the team, I took a lot of lessons from my special operations day on how to select the right individuals to solve problems. So this trait-based selection, trait-based hiring process is what I'm a really big fan of. And so we made a bet on the team. We had the cash to do it. We saw the potential in this market to build very quickly. And my team I built was coming from, a lot of Austin people on the BD and operations side. And then technology side, we have engineers all over the world. But my CTO, Crossen, is a West Point graduate from Bulgaria, but he was at Uber for years. So an OG Uber engineer. From him, we've been able to tap into a core group of ex-Uber engineers. And that has allowed us to build with scale and intensity much greater than what I think, the geospatial industry is used to building at in a speed. So we really ramped all that up to build very quickly for us.
How large is the team now?
We're right at about 30 people. But it's really exciting with this, small team and organic media. We launched our first product a year ago and have since upped the offering. But within 2 weeks of launching that first product, we had users in 182 countries of the world. And now we have users in every country we can sell to, because there's US restrictions on who you can sell to across the world. So that has been very exciting. Just a small team with a product mentality to build for global scale.
And what percentage of your team is in Austin, and what portion of the team is distributed? What's your sort of work remote / live in Austin ratios?
Yeah, we've got about 70-30, so about 30% in Austin, and then 70% out. But we have people all over the US as well. The mindset is, we're going to hire the best people possible for the role. And with this remote environment that we're in, we've figured that out, especially with software engineers. I worked at Uber for years. And engineers would come into the office, they'd put their headphones on, they'd have their blockers up so they wouldn't be distracted. And, they've got an hour commute each way. So we're like, well, just work at home. You're going to be more efficient there. And I do see, we are actively recruiting for roles right now in Austin, on the BD and operations and sales side as well.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that companies need to do what works for them. There's so many people out there in this entrepreneurial world who have an opinion, and they're right when it comes to return to the office, fully remote distributed teams, or this hybrid model. And my answer is, I don't think there's a right answer. I think the right answer is you do what works for your company. So what do you think about this idea of building culture and keeping people engaged, even with 70% distributed?
Yeah, it's super challenging for sure. Myself and the leadership team, we travel a lot. In-person meeting with the teams, sporadically throughout the year has been phenomenal, because there is just something you cannot get sitting on a Zoom or Google Meet all day. You have to see people in person, go to dinner, go lunches, hang out together. So we do that quite a bit. The other thing is, just embracing the technology tools that we have, like Zoom, Google Meet, Slack. Another really good product similar to Slack is Glue that we're starting to use, where it's just this instant communication that is text-based, but allows you to rapidly communicate back and forth, almost like an office chatter type setting. You have to have some skill-based knowing to filter it out and do that. So constant communication. We internally, we send very, very few emails internally. It's just too slow. Internal for us is all these communications I talked about. External is email. And so that's it. And then I always say too, hop on the phone. These things still work. Phones still take calls. You can pick up a phone and be like, I've got a question. I need an answer. Instead of being like, well, I sent a Slack message. I'm waiting for a response. Like, no, pick up the phone. I'm always available. So yeah, that's how we do it. Then just reemphasize communication. But I'll say underlying all that, what I'm really big on is feedback. Candid feedback. We owe each other the feedback. And in this remote environment, that feedback cycle seems to be slower, rather than if you're sitting around in the office talking about, this and that after a meeting or something. So that feedback cycle has to be much faster.
Well, we love to see companies that are growing fast, doing well, launching product, and getting so many clients right here in the Austin technology ecosystem. So congrats to you and SkyFi and all that you've done. And we're going to keep our eye on you because I'm predicting some big things for SkyFi in the future. So let's talk Austin, right? You're relatively new to our town. You moved here during that extreme boom of people who moved here 2-3 years ago. What do you think about the Austin technology community, good and bad? And where do you think we're going in the future?
Yeah, I think Austin is definitely on the rise. What I really like about Austin from a tech side is you have almost every major tech company either has a headquarters here or a presence here, and that's a signal. People want to be here, people want to work here and live here and buy houses here and invest in the community. And so, the derivative of that is there's good talent. There is good talent here as well, and so that is very important. And then there's just the very simple things. If you look at, the big tech hubs across the world, New York City, the Boston area, Silicon Valley, and Austin. People want houses and they want to, have a house that they can raise a family in. And those other locations, it's very hard for junior employees to do that because it is just literally expensive. And so that is really refreshing about Austin. I also like it from the investor standpoint. Most major VC firms have positioned themselves or presence or moved from the Bay Area to Austin. So that is a signal as well, where these investors believe in, this community and the fundraising and the funds that follow. And then for the geospatial or the space industry, there's a ton of space companies here in Austin. There's a company, Umbra, which is a partner of ours that has radar satellites. There's a new company, Albedo, which is going to have this fantastic resolution. Companies like Firehawk Aerospace are building 3D printed rocket fuel and engines. And so you just see this momentum here going, which is fantastic. So you can just build a company that's tax friendly as well, which is really, really important when it comes down to the investment and thing. What I wish it would be better at is I want to see more of it faster. I want to see more VCs. I want to see more tech companies moving here. Broaden out more to the masses about, the tax benefits and how to build a company and the opportunity zones if you're looking for land and to build, because that is all unknown for a lot of people just going, I want to start a company. And they're like, focus on the product, where it's like all these other things that make a company great, tax incentives, knowing your local congressional people as well. So I think that would be, something to work on and advertise from an Austin standpoint.
So before I let you go, I have one more question I ask everybody, and you're relatively new to town, so your answer will be probably more interesting than people who've been here 20 and 30 years. If someone was coming to visit you, maybe someone from Ashland, Wisconsin, who you went to high school with, was flying down, they'd never been to Austin, where's the one place you'd take them so that they could get the vibe of our city?
Yeah, it's an easy answer. We go to South Congress and just walk up and down South Congress because you get just this flavor of music, restaurants, shopping, a great view of the city, and it's all right there. And it's friendly too. Everyone around, there's tons of people. It's great shopping, great food. It's a one kind of cool. Let's go to South Congress. Everything will work itself out for what we want to do next after that.
So I agree, but the funny thing that I think of is that was my answer 31 years ago when I moved here, and SoCo was very, very different. I mean, you talk about keep Austin weird. Austin was actually weird 30 years ago. So it's interesting that it's still the answer, even though it's an entirely different place. So that's great. That's great. Well, Luke, any last words for people who are listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast? Anybody in the Austin tech community that you wish everybody knew about you, about SkyFi, about business?
Well, I'll say I'll do a plug for the business. Everyone can go to skyfi.com, launch our app, download it, and you can task a satellite, within a couple button clicks, which just saying that, for most people, it's not even, possible. They think it's like James Bond science fiction stuff. That's possible today. No, I'm on the theme. I think just, building in Austin, living in Austin, just, the more we can promote that, the better, because I think it is a special opportunity and a special place that more people need to embrace and love. Because again, Austin changes. Austin's always going to be weird, but the weirdness is just going to change over time with more people here and adapt to it. So that's it. It's been great talking.
Awesome. Well, Luke Fischer from SkyFi, thank you so much for being a guest here on Austin Tech Connect. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. If it wasn't for this audience, why would we do this show? We're trying at the Austin Tech Council to really bring everybody together. And so the more times you can learn about people like Luke, who you probably didn't know about, now if you run into him at some networking event, you'll be like, hey, I know who you are and I know all about SkyFi. That helps bring us all together. So we welcome your involvement. We welcome your companies to get involved and add your voice to our Austin Tech community and the Austin Tech Council as we look to the future. So please join, support, and be part of the Austin Technology Council.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.